You recently met with families of hostages still being held in Gaza. More than 100 hostages are believed to still be alive, including 6 Americans. A lot of the hostage families with whom I've spoken are pretty critical of the Netanyahu government. They say they don't think Netanyahu is doing enough to get their loved ones out, that he's prioritized military operations instead of getting the hostages back safely. Is that what they told you?
Well, what I heard from not only families of hostages, but as we walked the streets of Kfar Aza, kibbutz that was literally decimated by the Hamas terrorist invasion on October 7th, was deep grief, but also a determination to move their nation forward and to restore their security. I mean, it was remarkable to see the resilience of the people and the families that had lost loved ones, the families of hostages, and one understands their impatience. And I have 3 kids of my own, 2 grandkids. I can't even imagine the level of grief that they're experiencing and the struggle. But I must tell you that I have never spent 3 days on the road in any capacity, whether it was as vice president or as a member of Congress, where I have felt greater heartbreak and greater inspiration in combination. When we went to the south and we visited the kibbutz where the Hamas terrorists literally slaughtered families in a merciless and horrific way, I just never thought I'd see the aftermath of war like that, and literally an unspeakable evil. But to see the resilience of the people of Israel, to be among the troops along the northern border with Lebanon left me deeply inspired, but more convinced than ever that the United States of America must, in this moment, stand clearly shoulder to shoulder with Israel until they hunt down and destroy the threat of Hamas once and for all.
So you have said that Israel has the right to respond to those horrific attacks of October 7th and the responsibility to destroy Hamas, as you just did. But it does seem that the IDF strikes have killed more Palestinian civilians than they have members of Hamas. And there are Israelis who are worried about the high civilian death toll in Gaza, including for the reason that this high civilian death toll might actually ultimately make Israel less safe by inspiring more future terrorists. Do you share any of those concerns?
Well, first, Jake, look, I grieve the loss of innocent civilian lives. But one of the things I learned as we visited Sderot, where the terrorists literally took over the police station and murdered people in the streets, is that this was not simply a terrorist attack, but I believe it was a terrorist invasion. I mean, what I learned in our briefings in the South was that that fence line separating Israel from Gaza was breached in more than 90 different places simultaneously, paving the way for some 3,000 terrorists, heavily armed, to move into Israel. And in fact, the briefings I received pointed out that actually the terrorists had sufficient armaments and supplies to literally march all the way here to Tel Aviv, all the way to Jerusalem, but for the heroic efforts of police, IDF forces, and frankly, courageous citizens, they were stopped from doing that. So I really believe that what Israel is doing in Gaza today is absolutely essential. It is a response to an invasion that was launched with the intention of beginning the process of destroying the Jewish state of Israel. And I really do believe that this is a moment where America needs to speak with one voice, that we will stand with Israel today and tomorrow and every day until they have won outright this fight and eliminated the threat of Hamas.
We learned late Friday night that the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, spent multiple days this past week in the hospital, including time in the intensive care unit, for a medical issue that is still undisclosed. He did this without the public, without Congress, without the National Security Council, or even President Biden being informed for several days. The Defense Secretary temporarily assumed the Deputy Defense Secretary temporarily assumed some of the responsibilities while she was on vacation in Puerto Rico. As a former Vice President, you have unique insight as to what this actually means for a Secretary of Defense to be unavailable and to not be transparent with his boss about his health. What does it mean?
Well, first, I wish I wish the Secretary of Defense well, and I'm pleased he's making a full recovery. But the handling of this by the Secretary of Defense is totally unacceptable. And I believe the American people have a right to know about his medical condition, about the reasons for it, and he has a right to know who was informed of his incapacity. And I mean, but to think that at a time when we have allies at war in Eastern Europe and here in Israel, that the leader of America's military at the Pentagon would be out of commission for a number of days, and the President of the United States didn't know about it. I think it was a dereliction of duty, and the Secretary and the administration, frankly, need to step forward and give the American people the facts.
Yeah, we still don't even know what he was hospitalized for. Yesterday marked the 3rd anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. A Washington Post poll this week found that a third of Republicans believe the falsehood that it's probably or definitely true that the FBI instigated the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. President Trump was spreading that lie just this weekend, falsely claiming the FBI was, quote, leading the charge on January 6th. It's not true. Obviously, your life, the lives of your family members were threatened that day. What do you say to those, including your former running mate, who are actively spreading this baseless lie, or maybe even more importantly, to those who believe it?
Well, I would say to every American, as I did during my my presidential campaign, that I know I did my duty that day to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I kept my oath, and they also simply need to look to the facts that the Capitol Hill police endured great hardship and great harm. I think over 120 officers were injured. I saw many of them moving through the garage where I was spirited on the same day. And you know, the truth is that that this was a riot that should never have happened. As I've said many times before, the former president's words that day were reckless. I believe his history will judge his role in that. But at the end of the day, where I live every day, and frankly, the words of encouragement that I receive on a regular basis is I know by God's grace we did our duty that day 3 years ago. But I will tell you, Jake, that I understand why President Biden wants to focus his campaign on 3 years ago. The record of this administration has weakened America at home and abroad. And, you know, I actually don't think the election's going to be decided on a tragic day 3 years ago. I think it's going to be decided on the failed policies of the Biden administration that have emboldened the enemies of freedom around the world, that launched the worst inflation, that created the worst crisis on our border in American history. And it's one of the reasons why I continue to hope that with the Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire just around the corner, that all the good Republican voters in those states will give our party a fresh start and give us new leadership to lead our party forward in the election and beyond.
Is there somebody other than Donald Trump that you want the voters of Iowa to get behind? Is there somebody you prefer, whether it's Governor DeSantis or Ambassador Haley? You are somebody whose endorsement could actually make a difference with any wavering Republicans who want a fresh start, as you note.
Well, I've been speaking to several of my old competitors. I think very highly of Nikki Haley, of Ron DeSantis, and frankly, Chris Christie's been a friend for many years. And I don't put a lot of stock in endorsements. I'm not sure whether I'm going to weigh in or if and when I will. But, you know, I ran for president because I think different times call for different leadership, Jake. And I'm hoping that the good people of Iowa that I got to know so well in my campaign, the good people of New Hampshire and South Carolina, will look at this moment and recognize that elections are about the future. And we need new leadership in the Republican Party. We certainly need new leadership in the White House to move us forward. And if I see an opportunity to have an impact on achieving that, I'll certainly do it, and I'll keep you posted.
It's not just President Biden who's focusing on January 6th, of course. You have Donald Trump still talking about it. Do you want to just take this opportunity to clear up this lie that the FBI was leading the charge on January 6th? It's obviously not true. I'm sure you know it's not true. Do you want to make that clear to the voters?
You know, I've seen the director of the FBI repeatedly assure the American people that the FBI were not the instigators of the riot that occurred on January 6th. And frankly, I'm very grateful for the efforts of the FBI to bring nearly 1,000 people to justice who ransacked our Capitol and did violence against police officers that day. But you're right. We've been assured again and again that it was not the case. And I just must tell you, having been there that day, I mean, to see people literally breaking windows, ransacking the Capitol, it just infuriated me. I remember thinking, you know, not this, not here, not at the United States Capitol. And I believe everyone that conducted that riot at the Capitol needs to be held to the fullest extent of the law. I'm pleased that many have. But I've never been given any information. I've heard the many repeated assurances from the FBI that they were not involved, and I take them at their word.